Good morning, sir. Assalamualaikum, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning, sir.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. So, let us begin the class.
Sure, sir.
Yes, okay. So, Taskeen will be making a presentation, and who else?
Sami.
Aruz Ahmad Khan.
Acha, Urus. So, who will start?
Yes, sir. So I
Taskeen.
can start.
Okay, Taskeen. Please begin.
Uh, Good morning, teachers and dear classmates. So, in the previous, I am here to give the recap of 16th March. So, the topic discussed was communication. So, before discussing the topic, Sir has planned an activity in which he has appointed 6 volunteers, and they have to read a message and convey the message to the other person. And in this way, the other the thing, what is this happening? But gradually, we came to know that what Sir was trying to say. So. Uh, we are going to discuss the communication. So in this, I'm going to describe the communication definition, communication process, type of communication, barriers of communication, and types of communication barrier. So the first is a communication. It is a process of exchanging information, ideas, feelings, thoughts, emotions through speeches, signals, writing, and behavior. One thing we have to note that communication is not what we say, rather it is what the other person gets. Now, communication process. With this diagram, we can clearly understand what is communication. So, it basically has the 3 elements. One is the sender, and the other person is the receiver. In between, they have to exchange a message, which is the content, and between the between the sender and the receiver, there is this noise. So, I'm going to explain all the three uh, in detail. So sender is a person who encodes the message and sends the message to the receiver through an appropriate channel. Now the message is the content of communication, and it can be verbal, non-verbal, or symbolic language. Now the receiver, any individual or a group of individuals intended to receive, decode, and interpret the message is a receiver. So again, there is this noise. So there are chances when the message sent by the sender is not received by the recipients. So here comes the noise, and noise is present at all the levels, and it is also one of the barrier in communication. So that we will discuss further. Now, the types of communication. So, when people communicate with each other, they are communicating in a number of ways that depends on the message and its context in which it is sent. So, the type of communication based on the communication channel are the form of communication in loud or a piece of writing, commonly known as oral or a written, commonly we known as the oral or the written communication. So, one thing we have to note again is for fact-based communication, written mode of communication is always better. Now, the non-verbal communication, sending gesture, body language, posture, communication. Now, the barriers of message from being received as intended audience at all, or may only reach to a part of audience. In other cases, the message is received by the entire audience. So there are different types of communication. Simply means that we are bombarded with a message of all the kinds, like nowadays, and we are bogged down with too much of information, and we are and are slightly likely to make errors. Different kind of information that we have to listen on railway platform, because if we don't pay attention to it, then we'll miss out the key message that is for us. And we often communicated barrier, especially accent or the technical language or the jargons of the barcodes. So the example sir has quoted was the accent in which a Bengali speaks English and a Marathi speaks English is far different, in spite of the fact that they are both talking in the same language. Now, emotional barrier. So extreme state of emotion, extreme emotional state is also one kind of a barrier for taking any sort of decision in that extreme state of mind. Again, sir has quoted very perfect quote here, that never reply when you are angry, never make a promise when you are happy, and never make a decision when you are sad. Now, the physical barrier. So the surroundings, the distance between all factors that can create a physical barrier. For example, the way we are attending classes. They are like the online classes and the offline classes is a kind of physical barrier. And I have quoted this example because we can relate it to the most. Now, the organizational barrier. So the organizational barriers refers to the hindrance in the flow of information among the employees, or the kind of structure that the organization, hierarchical structure that the organization follow, or the divisional structure, etc. Now, the personal barrier. So factors that are personal to receiver or sender and act as a hindrance, like the person's wisdom, language comfort level, and the selective attentions. So these are the barriers that was discussed in the last class. Now, effective communication is 20% what you know, and 80% of how you feel about what you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Taskeen. Well done. Roos now.
Yes, sir. I will be presenting my screen now.
Thank you, sir.
So is my screen visible?
Yes.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. So I'll be presenting the recap of 16th of March. Now, first the class started with a class exercise in which there were 6 participants, and they were given a case study on Ford Motor Company. So the case study was that in 1991, Ford learned an expensive lesson in the value of barcodes. The problem arose when Ford found out that some airbags in the car might leak, burning gases, endangering the passengers even more. So the airbags were supplied by a company named TRW, which demonstrated the hazards of converting an experimental technology into mass-produced goods. And airbag released a small amount of gas and acted as a cushion when there was an accident in a car. And it's one of the most demanded safety features nowadays in cars. So now, to meet the increased demand by Ford, TRW accelerated its production by using machinery, uh, and but an out of tolerance machine damaged the threads on some of the airbags, which increased the risk of the air from the airbag spilling out. So the only problem was that no one knew which airbags were defective, and if they have used barcodes or any other means of methods of identifying the airbags which were defective, then the problem would not have arose in the first place. Furthermore, if the company ignored this, and if someone gets hurt because of the defect, then the company would be legally liable for ignoring a known product hazard. Now, to play it safe, Ford issued a multi-million-dollar recall, calling the whole lot back, even though the best estimates indicated that only 2% of the cars had defective airbags. Ford also announced that it expects TRW to share the expenses, and further, it renewed its contract with TRW, assigning 20% of its airbag business to its competitors. And this was a huge blow for TRW. Now, there were 6 participants on this case study. The 5 participants were told to speak in a room sheet, and one participant was asked to read the case study. Now, the first participant has to describe the case study verbally to the second, and the second one has to describe it to the third till they reach the 6th participant. So, this was the class exercise that was conducted. And let's look at some few key takeaways from this exercise. Now, the first key takeaway that we can look at it is we do not use feedback effectively. Like instead of asking more questions, we tend to fill the gap by assuming. And on the part of the sender, there should be concreteness of the main message. The main message should be clear, concise, and concrete. And on the part of the receiver should ask more and more questions instead of assuming by himself. He should ask more and more questions. We also know that facts are sacrosanct. Sacrosanct means regarded as too important or valuable to be interfered with. So only to the extent they support the story. So instead of getting lost in facts, one should also focus on the main message. And sometimes language also acts as a barrier and also hinders to convey the complete message in its true meaning. And instead of focusing on information, one should also focus on patterns as well. So these were the few key takeaways that we learned from this class exercise. And after this, there was a discussion on a diagram on communication process. So in this diagram, we can see that sender encodes a message and sends it to the receiver. Then after receiving the message, the receiver gives feedback back to the sender. And there are also some barriers while communicating the message, which are denoted as noise, as we can see in the diagram. So this is a basic diagram of how a communication process takes place. This was discussed in the class. Then after this, there was discussion on barriers in communication. Now there are several barriers while communicating. One of the most common barrier nowadays is information overload. In today's era, there is bombardment of information. There is so much of information that one finds it difficult to distinguish the true essence of message from the whole message. So it is important that one is able to distinguish the main essence of the message from the whole message. The second barrier is semantic barrier. The semantic barrier in communication can be defined as the misunderstanding and interpretation of meaning, which restrict effective communication. It can be in the form of a language, sign, or symbol. If one person is not able to understand the other person, if one person does not speak the language of the other person, then this barrier arises. The third barrier is emotional barrier. Sometimes our emotion takes over when communicating with others, and feelings such as anger, pride, and anxiety can cloud our judgment and prevent great communication. Self confidence plays an enormous role in breaking down psychological barriers. Emotional intelligence is also incredibly important skill to learn if you want to be seen as a leader in your organization. And being able to keep your emotions and the emotion of those others around you in check will lead to a more highly efficient and effective team. The next barrier that we can look at is physical barrier. Now, creating distance between people or erecting walls and dividing a staff leads to physical barrier to effective communication. And sometimes these obstacles are unavoidable because sometimes companies have offices at different locations. But there are also solutions for this also, such as video technology and other advancement in technology that can alleviate these hurdles and we can overcome these barriers. The next barrier that we can look at is organizational barrier. Organizational barriers hinders effective communication between the members of the organization. These barriers pertain to hierarchical factors, problem with structures or systems in the place in an organization, such as inefficient information system, lack of supervision or training, lack of clarity in roles and responsibility, and other deficiencies in organizational design, which makes it unclear and confusing to know how to communicate, who to communicate with. The last barrier that we can look at is personal barrier. This can arise because of poor self-esteem or an inability to make connection with others and can prohibit us from actually communicating with our colleagues. This challenge can lead to withdrawal from the business dynamic, keeping your opinions and ideas to yourself and removing yourself from the workplace. Now, this also happens if a person is an introvert. If he is not able to express himself, then also this personal barrier arises. Now, one can overcome this barrier by forcing oneself to communicate with others. And though it can be tough to break, taking small steps by keeping your communication simple, listening to others, and staying calm will help build self confidence over time, and a person will be able to overcome this barrier. So, this was all that was discussed in the class on 16th of March, and I would like to end my recap. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Taskeen and Arus. Both of you did a good job, especially the preparation in terms of the slides, PPT slides. That was very good on both the for both the speakers. Maybe for Arus, for some of the slides, the content was heavy, especially the
Yes, sir.
barrier slide. So there is no need to write the entire content. We have already made this point that PowerPoint means there should only be points, no running text.
Okay, sir.
That should be avoided.
So also
And
it's a rose, not a rose. So my name is Arose.
a rose.
Yes, sir,
What does
Arose.
that mean?
So actually, I don't clearly remember the meaning, but as far as I can remember, it's someone bold and loyal, bold and a loyal person. Yes, sir.
Because the Urdu word which I have come across is urus.
Yes, sir.
Maybe.
So but it's a rose.
Okay, I'll check. I'll check myself also. Okay, so Taskeen, overall you did a very good job, and you were talking about non-verbal gestures. Except for that, I think you could
Yes, sir.
be slightly more energetic.
Thank you, sir.
Overall, you maintained a pleasant disposition, but it could be slightly more jovial and you know radiating energy. So that could add to your
Okay, sir.
impact
I'll
on
work.
others. Otherwise, you did a reasonably good job. I'm impressed by your performance. So, Arus, you also did a good job, but except for one
Thank you, sir.
part where I felt that slightly it was, content heavy. So, making this judgment as to what to cover. For example, there was no need to narrate the entire story which was discussed. The story could have been any story. It was incidental that we selected. So the point was that given a fact-based story which has heavy content, there are chances that barriers may occur. And we saw that finally in the end we were left hardly with 1% of, not even 1% of the story. So that's more important because the audience have a context, already have a context, so there
I
was
will
no
work on
need.
that, sir. Okay.
And the second thing which I feel is you have good command over language and you spoke effortlessly, except for one part which I have been discussing earlier also, that communication includes others also. It should be an inclusive communication. It should not be an exclusive communication. So if we say, if you want to be a leader, you have to behave like this. If we want to be a leader, that would be a more inclusive communication because in that you are including yourself when you are talking of communication. So use we instead of you. That's a better demeanor to demonstrate during presentation. But overall, both of you did a good job. I'm impressed. Now, coming to the last issue which we want to discuss in the context of the fourth unit, and that is the unit
Thank you, sir.
on, on leadership and motivation and directing. So, the last issue which I will take up is the issue of motivation. And in this context, before starting the discussion, I would like to share with you two examples, just to set the process of thinking amongst the group members who are present. There are two forms, two examples, highest level of motivation which I have come across, and one is the army or the defense services overall. Let us say defense services. One is ready to lay the life if required for the cause of the nation. Now, what could be more prestigious than one's life? Isn't it? But a person is ready to sacrifice that most precious thing that he has with him, and that is life. So, I would like you to reflect on this question as to what is that this cause that causes such a highest level of motivation. The second example is nearer home. Uh, all of you have seen your mothers working in your families. Someday they are sent to a new family, and that family then becomes their entire world. and then they spend every moment of their life in building the families. Again, that's one of the highest form of motivation which I have come across. So whether it is in defense services or whether it is in the conduct of our own mothers whom we have seen working in the house. For example, mother never asked for a holiday. If you have an employee, he would ask for a holiday, isn't it? Normally, she is the first to get up. She is the last to go on the bed, and everybody has. When the whole day's responsibilities are over, and what is this which causes such a highest level of motivation? This is the question I want to begin with. Can we have got some responses?
So, sense of attachment
So,
and
in the
belonging.
defense case, we can say our love to the nation.
Hmm.
In the case of defense,
So is it so that
Sir,
they are born with that love, or it is instilled in them?
no, sir. They see around that what the nation and what the freedom fighters have done for our nation, and what the other defense people are doing for the nation. So they get motivated from them.
Hmm. I wonder whether they have read about all of them, especially people at the lower rank. They have read about freedom struggle. I don't know. Maybe some of them have read, but still they are ready to sacrifice their life for the cause of the nation.
Sir, I think the sense of attachment and belongingness.
Sense of attachment and belongingness.
The aspirations as well.
Aspirations.
So sense of responsibility.
Okay, yes. Sense of
The training,
responsibility could be one.
the training which they go through,
Huh? The training.
training.
Okay. Now you are getting specific. What could be the elements in the training which sort of instills
I'm talking
this?
about the lessons the training which they go through while they are being recruited, and for
Mm,
2 or 3 years they are being trained
mm,
on all grounds. Not only how to they are going to perform their duties, but also how they will act when a certain situation arises. So it's ethical as well.
mhm, mhm,
Sir, in my opinion, in both the cases, there is love. In the first case, it is the love for the nation, which ultimately leads to the rise of the nationalism in a person and also
mm,
ignites the flame to serve the country and do it by joining the armed forces. Although there are many ways, but joining the armed forces becomes very pious to a person when this feeling of affection and this feeling of love grows over time. And in the second case, sir, the love of the mother is basically the same, but just in the another direction towards her family.
mm,
She is also entitled. She also has the mentality of serving selflessly. She does not want any reward, and in the in the case is same for a soldier also, a soldier or an officer.
mm.
sir, in both the cases, it is due to their commitment and the societal expectations from them.
Societal expectations.
Yes, sir. For example, in the training, the armed forces are trained in a way that they are expected to do everything they can in times of need. That includes giving of their lives as well.
Mm,
So, but training is the secondary thing. First, we have to uh, clear the test, and for clearing the test, we have to think first that we want to join the army. So training is the secondary thing.
So
First,
mm.
we have to think to join.
sense of belongingness in case of mother.
Sense of belongingness. Yes, yes, you are right. So this is, I think we have got enough inputs from you. What you are hinting is that three terms which I would like to share with you. One, you said belongingness. I would like to say that this is a kind of sense of identity. Hmm? When you identify yourself with something, like for example, this silly statement which is made when girls are sent to a new home, या वही तुम्हारा घर है, isn't it? Now, such a simple statement, but it does the trick. And the girl starts identifying that house as her house, isn't it? So that sense of identity that this is my house, actually that creates a lasting motivation. The second thing which you pointed out, in fact, if you look at the army also, the training part somebody was emphasizing. This sense of identity is created through variety of ways. Training is one of them. There are many other methods also, like for example, wearing the same uniform. Uniform also creates that sense of identity. So you know that uniform is very sacrosanct in all such forces. So then the drill part of it, the kind of activities they do together, and drill is an important part of it. So that also might be creating that sense of identity. So to me, if we want to, you know, ensure that people have lasting motivation, one of the things that we need to ensure is creating this sense of identity. And this identity should not be, a fake kind of thing, but a real thing, something which the person, with the person really identifies with. Then I think in army they do it through other methods also. In fact, they use various identities, already existing identities. For example, you have Sikh regiments, for example. You have Gorkha regiments. Now, what is this? Here also, is there an attempt to create that identity? So sometimes, these sub identities that we have, they are also being used very effectively in the army setup. And I experienced this when one of my former student came to me and he said that, sir, it's a very dangerous situation. He was company commander at that point of time, and he said, and he was posted in Northeast. And he said it actually creates at times some very difficult situations for us. And he said, I was the company commander, and I had around 150 men with me there in the Northeast, and it was a difficult terrain. And often we would lose a member because of some ambush or some attack. And but the unit stayed with me. And then he described me a situation, and he said, "Sir, once it so happened that a one of my men, they call their people my man, that was the expression he used. He said, one of my men came and disclosed to me, and he said, okay, I've shot dead a person. And he said, I was taken aback. I said, what has happened? He said, this fellow was involved with my wife in my absence. I came to know of it and I shot him point blank. And now it's your job to save me. So he said, okay, it was a very tough situation. He has done, naturally, he has taken law into his hand. And but he was expecting that my company commander will save me. So this is, I'm just describing a situation which was a real situation which this person faced. And he said, only when you sort of live up to those demands that these men put on you, you can earn to expect their complete identity with yourself. They will identify with yourself. So sense of identity to me is one of the core of creating. Now, in the discussion, some of you pointed out one more thing, sense of responsibility. When you make people responsible, maybe in addition to, sharing that statement, often the elders and the family would say this, it's your house now. Yes, there are certain responsibilities also that are associated. And there is a beautiful story which I read. It's by an Urdu writer called Rajendra Singh Bedi. He is one of the accomplished Urdu writer, and he wrote a novelette. It is called, the title of that novelette was "Apne Dukh Mujhe De Do," and it's a very poignant story in the sense that there was a girl who comes to this house, new house, and on the first night, the husband narrates the challenges and difficulties he's faced with on the home front, financial troubles, then brothers and sisters not yet settled, and all those problems he narrates, the aging parents and their difficulties and all. And after they had a long chat, the wife says a statement, and she says that कि अपने दुख मुझे दे दो. And the husband doesn't take it very seriously. He said just कोई रटाया जुमला है यो कह रही है. But she spends her entire life, living up to those expectations which she has set for herself. And to such an extent that often she ignores her husband also in the process because she has other responsibilities to look after. And gradually, husband feels the pinch, and he realize he gets this feeling that he is neglected. For example, when he would come home, she would always be busy in things, and she would be having crumpled clothes and soiled hands and all that, and because she would always be busy in solving some issue of the family, and to such an extent that husband drifts away to another woman. And finally, when the reconciliation takes place and Then this lady repeats that statement was second time, that actually we have made that promise to each other, and I was just trying to live up to those promises which I have made to you. And then the husband realizes his mistake, that he did not take it seriously, that statement, but she spends her entire life living up to those expectations which he has set for us. So, when you feel responsible, there cannot be, more potent motivation than this. So, to me, this sense of identity, sense of responsibility, these are two factors which cause lasting motivation in the person. I'll stop here for a while if you have some reflections or some observations on what I've shared with you.
So it could be the sense of responsibility only, or some authority as well.
Authority, I think, actually, this is earned, it is not given.
But I think with authority comes responsibility.
Sir, but authority
Authority.
comes under identity, if we say we can relate to this.
Hmm. Because authority would be a bit formal word to me. How the mother, for example, is able to exact obedience from, let us say, children? Is it because she has authority? Yes, authority in that sense of the term she has. Like, for example, we say all elders have authority over us. It is part of the convention, maybe, that we must respect our elders.
Sir, can we say that our love and affection towards a person can only grow if we have the sense of responsibility towards that relationship that we share with that person?
Exactly. Isn't it? There's a couplet which is slightly difficult, but I'll try to, share the gist of its meaning. It says कि मिटा दे अपनी हस्ती को अगर कुछ मर्तबा चाहे, मिटा दे अपनी हस्ती को अगर कुछ मर्तबा चाहे, कि दाना खाक में मिलकर गुले गुलजार होता है. When seed, destroys its own identity, then it turns into a big, beautiful tree. So I think that in that context, I use the expression that freedom, the authority is earned. It is not given on a platter. Earlier, also, when we were talking about the issue of power and authority, we made that distinction between personal power and positional power. So generally, we use the term authority in the context of that positional power. You are given a position, you are occupying a chair. And the power is earned in the context of this feeling of care, the feeling of responsibility that you feel towards others, the feeling of affection that one has for others. That, helps you gain compliance from others. Not that we boss around over them. Any other observation or reflection? Rose, what is your take on this, what we have discussed? And one more thing about this kind of motivation which you will experience is, do we ever achieve the highest level as far as the motivation is concerned?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Actually, the strange thing about this kind of motivation is that whenever you reach the top and you feel that as if you are hitting the top gets pushed up. So the bar keeps increasing.
Can we say higher expectation, lower motivation?
Pardon?
If you have higher expectation, the level of
Higher
motivation will decrease.
actually, one thing which you will note that expectations generally we use when others have expectations. These are self expectations. That is the highest form of motivation. We are talking about the motivation which is internal, not external, whether it is the example of defense forces or the example of families which I discussed. That motivation is inside. Is it? So generally, we have a situation where we operate at two levels. One is the maximum we are capable of, and the minimum that we can get away with. In organizational kind of situation, I'm not talking of defense forces, they are also an organization. In fact, I would say they are institutions, not organizations. But in typical organizations that we experience, and I've asked this question to many of my old students who worked in variety of organizations. Generally, in the corporate jobs, they say that we maintain a level so that we can retain our membership of the organization. So the minimum that we can get away with. And they confide this to me that they are far more capable than they are actually contributing to organization. Now it is, I don't know why organizations are not able to make full use of the potential. And to me, the reason could be these two factors which I've described. Maybe they don't create that sense of identity in the real sense of the term. And second, they don't make people responsible for things. And because of that, they never achieve the level, the maximum they are capable of. And they settle at the level, the minimum they can get away. And I was talking about that maximum one is capable of, the maximum when the motivation is internal, when the moment you reach the maximum is pushed up. You realize that you can do much more than what you are doing presently.
So, but I believe that most of the times we try to get away with the minimum. Like, it's not just particular to an organization, but I think I have seen this happening like in our daily lives as well.
Mm.
So I think it's applicable in our daily life. For example, we have been conditioned that way कि इतना हो जाए तब तो सही है, उसके आगे तो देखा जाएगा.
And that's what I'm trying to emphasize, that whenever external factors shape our behavior, this situation might arise or might be there. But the moment the generator is inside, which radiates energy from inside, we are capable of then reaching to the first, the desired state, which I talked about, the maximum we are capable. So that is the question which I am leaving for you to reflect on. How can we ignite the fire inside? Okay. So we stop here. We'll continue our discussion tomorrow on this. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much, sir.